All right, so we have our school API here. We're going to start using something called Django DRF. And let's take a look at what the course page has for us. So today's 30th. Okay, so today is July 30th. We're going to be going over using Django as an API, which we're doing. The Django REST framework is what we're going to introduce today. Again, this is going to make our lives easier. So scrolling down here, we set up our project. We do that. All right, installing Django REST framework. First, we want to do pip install. So it's going to follow the steps here. Pip install Django REST framework, all one word. So let me kill my server. Don't want that running right now. In my terminal, I'm in my virtual environment. Want to make sure of that. I'm going to do pip install Django REST framework. That'll get that stuff. After that installs, so it should be pretty quick, we want to include that as an app. So REST_framework is the app you want to include in your installed apps. So again, this is in your settings file. So I go to my project settings. Probably want more room here. Go to installed apps. We need to add, again, REST framework. So Django is going to look for that. All right, so we have REST framework there. What else do we need to do here? Some functionality. All right, we're going to do routes, serializer, and import REST framework. So for our routes, we're going to set up something called a view set. So this view set offers a lot of bundled logic, kind of right off the bat. I guess we could do that quickly. Again, it's pretty easy. So I'll copy this and modify it. So I go to my URLs. We're going to import from REST framework routers, default router, and we're going to register something called student view set. Base name will be students. URL patterns. Okay, so this, let's delineate here. This is the manual way below, and this is going to be the DRF way. The DRF stands for Django REST framework. Let me take these out. All right, so we have student view set. That's something we're going to create. And this is coming from Django REST framework. Essentially, that's going to create your routes automatically for you. So here we have to manually create these routes. This will take care of that for us. So we're going to have those URLs created already. So let's make sure we import that from school app import. See if that works. Okay, so let's go to my views. Let's create something called student view set. Let's see what our curriculum page has. So views. You need to import view sets from REST framework and then use a serializer. So in my views, REST framework has something called view sets. That's what we're going to be using here. And let's replace this. Okay, so this looks very similar to what we did with model forms, where we inherit something and then just going to apply some fields. In this case, query set is one of the items. That's where we pass it the data that the serializer is going to work with. In this case, can be students.objects.all. And then we're going to use student serializer. But the important thing is that this is going to be a new serializer we create. So that's going to be something we got to do still. But let's take care of that. So my serializers, again, this is the manual way where we wrote it out. So let's add some comments, manual way. And then we have the DRF way. This is where we want to use Django REST framework. So REST framework dot serializers import model serializer. Again, very similar to how we did with model forms. We have something called ModelSerializer, and that'll take care of all the hard work for us. So all the stuff that we were doing before, we do probably in like 3 or 4 lines. So if I do class student serializer, and let's call it DRF, so I don't conflict with names, ModelSerializer, we need to specify 2 items. What items do we need to specify? Let's see. Serializers right up here. So we need to specify a model and the fields. So this looks essentially like my form. So my model form had a class meta. I want to use student as my base model, and fields will just be name. I think I could have courses here actually. So let's try that. Student should be from models. So from school app dot models, import everything. All right, so we specify the model and the fields, again, very similar to our form, and we can do the same for courses. Course, and all right, so that's all we need to do for a serializer. Notice that's way easier than us having to manually kind of loop over everything and convert it. We just specify, hey, what model do we want to work with? What fields we do care about? And then let's see how we can use this. So these serializers have now been created. Go back to my views. I'm going to import all of those. So that should be defaults there. So this is my view set for students, and my view set for courses will be essentially the same. All right, so I have that set up. Let's see what our URLs is going to look like. So again, we have our default router. Let's add another item. So we're going to have the view set. Again, the view set is providing a bunch of functionality for us so that we can kind of let Django do all the hard work for us. If I do courses, register. Okay. Let's actually print out our URLs and see what they look like. Router.urls. Okay, so just to review the steps we did for DRF, we did a pip install Django REST framework, all one word. In our settings file, we added that app name of REST_framework so that we could use the functionality out of there. The three things we did was serializers. We created serializers based off of ModelSerializer, and that's coming from REST framework serializers. Again, 4 lines of code to implement that. If we go to our URLs, again, we don't need to manually create our URLs if we're using REST framework. We can use something called view sets that will basically give us URLs automatically.
So is that view set, is that coming from the REST framework?
Yep. Yeah. So that's part 3. So part 2 was update URLs, and then our view sets are coming from REST framework. So import view sets, and then from model view set, you can basically set a query set, which is the data, and the serializer that's going to be used to serialize that data. That's all I need to provide. And then again, all this stuff will be done for you. But let's actually see this in play. Need to verify one thing. Okay, let's see how this looks. Did I break my page? Question, yes or no. I probably need to change a few items. We'll get to it. So I want to run my server. Okay, so notice, I don't know if you guys can see this, it looks pretty ugly, but this is the URL patterns that I'm printing out. I did it right here, where I'm printing out the router URLs. These are all the URLs that kind of automatically get created for you. And so you having to manually do it. So it's similar to these paths, but again, it's been standardized so that, you know, these CRUD operations are done so often that Django REST framework's like, all right, we're going to kind of just do this for you. So it's going to create something called students list, something called student detail, course lists. Again, it has the patterns for us so that we don't have to manually do it. So let's see if this works. Refresh. All right, so switching to Django REST framework, your UI is going to be a little different. So notice I just refreshed the page, and now I have something that looks kind of interesting. So in this case, we're looking at, why does it say student? For instance, like I copied something incorrectly. Course view set. Course. Okay. this one. My URLs. And here. Okay, so all right, so we're at courses, and this is showing our course list. All right, so this looks similar to what we were seeing before, but now it's Django REST framework has a kind of a front end for it, so we could do items here. So we're making a GET request here. We could submit a post request from the DRF right now. So if we wanted to create a new course, we're going to set a post request to this URL. This is a little different than before, so I want to make sure that we're kind of understanding what magic we're getting. So before, to create a new course, we'd go to courses/new and submit a post request there. Now we're submitting a post request just to courses. And the question you might have is why? Like, why did that change? And that's, again, name of the game is reading documentation. So we go to Django REST framework, default router. The REST framework documentation is good. It's not as good as I would like to see it, but this is basically what we're focused on. This table can be a little hard to parse, but there's 6 actions that we can do here. We have a get and a post. So notice the action. We're listing when we do a get request to whatever this format is. So again, this format is just the base URL. So a get request to, where were we? If we do a get request to courses, that's going to just show us our data. So that's what we got out here. All right. But we could also do a post request. Let me just move this to my tab over there. So I don't want to keep bouncing around. Okay, so we could do a post request to that same URL. Again, this is what has changed. This is the default routing for Django REST framework. So we do a get or a post. The get will list all the details, or sorry, we'll list all of those items, in this case, courses. But we submit a post request to that same URL, it's going to create a new course. But the other things that have changed are the submit values here. Notice that we now are going to be using puts and deletes. Previously, we were using posts to do a new, update, and delete. But Django REST framework, they're using it like the more conventional HTTP methods. So in this case, if we actually want to update, we're going to have to submit a put request to the specific URL. All right. So if I'm using Django REST framework, we can create a new course. So I can use this UI. I could say, let's just say drama 101. So much drama. Let's say Sean and Pluto want to be in that course. All right, so if I post, notice I get the response. It's automatically done for me. So I get 2 students in there. What else? All right, so we talked about put requests. So if I actually go to like a detail page, so I'll go to courses, and this course, I don't have an ID for it. I think it's course 5 now. Yep. So if I go to the detail page, I see the detail just like before. It just looks a little different from the REST framework, page here. But now we could do other options. We could do a delete, and this is going to send a delete HTTP method to this URL. So we're going to submit a delete request to school API courses/5. That's going to delete this item. We could also submit a put request. So notice that this says put. Obviously, this is just a button, but it's signifying that we're going to make a put request to this URL. All right, so just know that your routes are a little different than before if you're using REST framework. They've standardized it, and so we got to make sure we know what routes and what methods to send it to. And again, reading documentation is going to kind of solve that gap for you, where you're like, okay, what is, I want to destroy something. How do I do that? Well, I need to send a delete request to the URL that's specified. We haven't talked about patch too much. Patch is kind of cool, actually. So patch lets you update parts of a data structure instead of sending all of it. So we've not talked about the patch method too much, but that if we want to do that in what's it called, Postman, we can send a patch request. What this means is only the data you specify is going to be updated. So if we look at a student, let's go to a course detail. So course update. So when I want to update a course, I need to specify all of these fields, and it's going to update all of those fields. Let's say I just want to change the description. So method one is doing a post. If I do a post here, I guess I can't do a post since I'm using Django REST framework. But anyway, if I did do a post here, or let's say a put, so if I'm going to update course 3, and let's add some exclamations here. I still got to specify a name here. If I leave off name, I'm going to get an issue. So let's try without name and do a post. Notice we got an error saying, okay, I guess, wait, oh, yeah, so slashes, they need slashes. I run into this like 90% of the time. All right, notice it says name of this field is required. What if I don't know the name or I just don't care to update it? Like, we have 3 fields here, or if we had like 99 fields, we don't want to specify all those fields. We want to just update one value. So that's where patch comes into play. So this patch method will let us to specify, okay, we want to change description. We don't care about any other fields. We just want to update description. If I send this, double quotes, no comma. All right, there we go. So notice that the name is still the same. Like we didn't blank that out. Students are still the same. Description did get updated. So that's where patch comes into play. Again, this is what Django REST framework is employing. So if you want to do a partial update, you can use the patch method as part of your request.
So do you have to change your views for your edit and your delete?
So good question. Those views automatically created also. So anything down here, I could comment all this out because I'm not using it anymore. Shift comment. This was when we were manually routing ourselves. So we had our URLs, and that was calling our views that needed to kind of handle it. All the magic is being done by student view set. It has all the logic baked in for creating, updating, deleting, and reading. So now, without much effort, like all this stuff commented out, all I have is student view set. I tell it what data to use, what serializer class, and it knows how to create them, knows how to delete them, knows how to update them. It's all baked into this model view set. So again, I know we taught you the hard way before, but kind of just looking at this, let's look at our models. Models have unchanged. Forms are the same. Serializers. So serializers, 4 lines of code. View set, 3 lines of code, and our URLs, just like a couple lines of code for each model, and we're good to go. Like now we have our API that runs. So again, when creating an API, Django REST framework makes it pretty much a snap to go from, once you have your models, you just create your serializers, your view sets, and your URLs, and you got all that functionality in probably like 10, 15 minutes time, compared to having to do it manually this way. Obviously, much less code and much less development time. The important thing is understand what's going on behind the scenes. So the reason we make you do it kind of the hard way first is because you should know what a serializer is actually doing. You shouldn't just assume it's a magic box and say, okay, I'm giving you something, give me something. I'm just going to assume, I don't care what it is. You should know a serializer is basically converting data from your programming language specific data structures to some other format. In this case, that format is JSON, because JSON is kind of like a universal format for the web. So we could transfer data back and forth using JSON. And then once we're in our application, whether it be JavaScript, Python, C++, whatever language it is, can take that JSON and convert it back to like data structures in JavaScript or Python or C++ or whatever language you're using it. So JSON is that kind of neutral syntax that's universally accepted. And then every programming language has its own syntax for like lists or dictionaries or whatever it might be. All right, so any questions on using the Django REST framework? Again, a lot of it's going to be reading documentation. So again, kind of understand what your routes are. Get and post to your base URL. So if I'm doing that again here, I would let's go to students. So my students base URL, this is where I'm going to do a GET request to actually see my data. Or I could do a post request to that same URL to add a new student. Again, there's no /new. If I try to go to /new, it's not going to find that route. All right, what questions do you guys have about using DRF? Again, I know we're introducing it. Documentation is going to be very important. We're going to cover another full project of DRF, I think, on Wednesday. So we will get more practice with this, but just kind of understand there's a lot of baked in goodness to Django REST framework that you can take advantage of so long as you understand what's going on. I know we're running to lunchtime, but let me just do a couple of things. So notice for courses, we're just listing the student IDs. Let's say most of the time you do want to just list the IDs. You don't want to list all the details, but you could list the details here if you wanted to. That's going to be done with your serializers. So messing with the Django REST framework serializers, here by default, it's going to use the primary IDs for the courses and the students, because those are like many relationships and they just are going to list IDs. But if you actually wanted to like see the details, we could do something like courses equals many related field and many how do I do this? So many related field. I can do it. Child relation. So serializers. So again, by default, it's going to be IDs, but let's do string related field. Let's see that. Okay, need to import stuff. Currently, string related field. Okay, let's see if that changes anything. So I did that for students. All right, so let's do add course that none. That's another one. Many related field. So let's read about many related field. So serializers, Django, DRF, many related field. All right, serializer relations. How do I see many related fields? So it looks like primary key, slug, nested. So you could do nested relationships. That's a little more complicated. Let's go to, where's the one I want? So I want to do something like this. And to do that, we use serializers. That's from many equals true. Serializer string. Okay. Let's do that. Let's do string related field. That's what I was done before. True. Let's get what I want. All right, there we go. So now we have actual string representation. Since they're using IDs, we converted it to using a string related field. So this will basically grab the str methods. So we actually can see what courses we're in. So Sean's in calculus, drama 101 calculus again, YZ in 2 classes. One of my puts might have updated that twice. Yeah, it looks like Reno and Sean both like calculus twice. Yeah, so you can manipulate the way your serializers put out the data. By default, it's going to use IDs, but you have the option to show other items. If you wanted to use a course serializer, I believe there's a way to do that. Let's see with nested relationships. Okay, so you just call the serializer. That should be simple enough. So if I add this for students, should we call students serializer DRF, many equals true. So without this, if I just have students for my courses, it's going to show me IDs. So if I go to /courses, right, notice we just have IDs. So 1 and 3, looks like I have duplicate data here. So that is something I screwed up. Anyway, we just see IDs here, but I don't know, it's not easy for me to kind of understand who's actually in these courses. So if I wanted to see more detail, I could actually use my student serializer and set that equal to students. So now instead of students defaulting to the IDs, I should get something that looks a little better. So if I refresh, put that in there, notice I get the name. So this is a full student object serialized. Notice that my courses are still IDs. And this is kind of the situation I was trying to avoid before, where I'm listing courses. So I don't really want, my student to have courses nested here, because I'm doing courses, student, and then getting courses again. So it's kind of getting repeated, but there's a way to remove that nesting. Flatten equals true. See if that takes care of it. Nope, that broke it. Okay, ignore that. But essentially the main takeaway is way easier with DRF. You can control your serializers and show data in different ways instead of just relying on IDs. But you have the same control as with your manual way. Again, here we're showing the detail here instead of just the ID. You can achieve the same thing with serializers. Gotta just kind of understand how to use some other related fields. So there's string related field. If you look at the documentation, there's also you could do nested relationships. That's something probably good to read about, because you're probably going to have to deal with that at some point. But just know you can get all that data nested if you needed to. Any questions? No questions out there? Certainly must be one question. All right, so for your challenge then, you're going to be going through the curriculum page. So we have our wine API. You can get practice using ModelSerializer, so just follow along from Django REST framework setup. So the wine project that you guys did during the course the class yesterday, you get practice with using Django REST framework with that. And then I kind of just ran using DRF with schools API. So that's kind of what I ran through today. So maybe kind of reverse instead of doing the wines API. The students one is more interesting because you have those relationships between two different models. Yeah, otherwise, schools API and this tutorial are your challenges for the weekend. All right, what questions do you guys have? Or does it kind of make sense? Again, just redoing what we did yesterday, but using Django REST framework, which should make your life easier, much quicker to develop from start to finish. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll let you guys go to lunch. And then after that, just work on the challenges. Reminder, we're gonna have an early stand down today.